Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Salam Media. Today we unpack day 2 of South Africa-Israel case at the International Court of Justice around the Genocide Convention and specifically possibility of genocide happening in Gaza. As a brief recap, yesterday we heard from the South African legal team as they attempted to prove both genocide in intent and in practice, and obviously call on the court to institute provisional measures. Now, the bar to prove genocide is quite high, but to unpack this and today's proceedings, we have two special guests. First, we have Dr. Zakariyya Al-Sheikh, who's a political analyst and ex-member of parliament in Jordan, as well as international relations expert and political analyst Daniel Kinnear of Africa Insights think tank. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Good afternoon, Fazlin. Good afternoon, Doctor.
So Dr. Zakariyya, I'll start with you. Assalamu alaikum. Yesterday, we saw the South African legal team go into a great detail to show intent of genocide. And today, from the Israeli perspective, we've seen them attempt to rebuff that notion by saying that the South African legal team has perverted the term and the usage of the word genocide. So within that context, do you think that the legal case that South Africa is bringing has been able to prove intent, specifically because the threshold is so high? So what are your thoughts on that? And obviously on Israel's rebuffing today?
First of all, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to thank Salam Radio for hosting me, and to Mr. Daniel also, to everybody. In fact, this is a very important and historical moment in the history of Palestine. Since 76 years of Israeli atrocities, genocide, massacres, Israel never stood in international tribunal or never brought to justice or to accountability. Today is history. South Africa has made history for not only for Palestine. South Africa also proved that it is also was the victim of apartheid, was the victim of ethnic cleansing. South Africa had the pain and felt the pain. So they are the best representative to bring Israel to justice. Since 76 years, Palestinians are suffering of occupation. And today comes South Africa to bring Israel on international platform to expose them in front of the whole people in the whole universe. So only this principle that Israel now is being under accountability and brought to justice is a victory for Palestinians, is a victory for all free people in the whole world, is a victory for the victims who have, encountered a lot of difficulties by the Israelis. Since the 7th of October 2023, we are talking about 23,700 shaheed, or people who were massacred and killed in Gaza. We are talking about 60,000 persons out of the Gazan people. They have been injured because of that, oppression, unjustifiable war. Now, Israel is trying to show that it is a self-defense, but they have forgotten that the issue of Gaza, the issue of Palestine, didn't start on the 7th of October. It started since 76 years, and all the suffering is accumulating. From the legal point of view, I feel this is one of the most successful move for the Palestinian people. Even in Jordan here, I would like just to tell you, in Jordan here, with disregard of the result of the court, the ruling of the court, the people in Jordan, in Palestine, in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, they are really so thankful, with great gratitude to South Africa, who has really brought those children whom they were massacred, the blood of the Palestinian Gazan people, whom we have seen over more than 90 days already. They brought them into justice. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Legally, I think the South African legal team were so equipped with evidences. They presented the case in such a way, especially I would like, of course, to applaud all of them. Adila Hashim was one of the strongest among the legal team, even John and Timbika and all of them. Each one has played in a certain sector his role very, very well. While today the Israelis, they try to twist the neck of facts. They tried their best to respond to the South African evidences, which brought with videos, with pictures, with numbers, with facts on the ground, and they really presented the genocidal crime in its concrete manner. I can go into details about even the precautionary measures which they were asking, like the provincial measures to immediately declare the cease of attacks, to cease the attacks on Gaza, and they have placed certain evidences and certain facts on the ground, which shows the importance of having a very emergency and very prompt decision as a precautionary measure for ethnic cleansing and for genocidal activities which are happening. Israel tried to show that it is self-defense, but they have failed completely. They even talked about the individual practices that does not represent the military of Israel, but also they have failed because they brought South African legal team. They brought evidences from political leaders, from military leaders, and their not only intention, their practices that they are really committing genocidal activities inside Gaza. If you like me to continue, I could continue. I need to give a platform to Brother Daniel too, but if you like me to continue, I can do. Yes.
Oh. Yeah. Well, shukran for that, Dr. Zakariyya. I want to touch on one of the points that you made, which was the basis of a lot of what the Israeli sort of legal team made, was that this was the basis of self-defense. Now, obviously, you have created or portrayed for the viewers and the listeners a very clear scenario that we know that this is 75 years of an occupation, and that obviously the 7th of October, everything didn't just spring into existence. But within the context of this particular case, the relevance of the self-defense argument, I think it's important for us to unpack that, whether it actually carries legal weight within this court, or whether or not it's really a diversion tactic, from Israel. And within that, another point that they made was that genocide is not part of the policy of the Israeli government. However, if you were to go and look at the ruling party, Likud party, if you look at their manifesto and their policies as a party, which is obviously the party that Netanyahu is the head of, you will see that they talk about a Israel that doesn't include a Palestine. And would that be, sort of constituted as intent if we're talking about the fact that they're arguing that, it's not government policy?
For sure, it is government policy, because it practices on the ground.
Dr. Zakariyya.
Yes, for sure, it is a government policy and military also policy. We can see it on the ground that what they are doing is leading to genocide and to ethnic cleansing. How do I do that? How
Dr.
do I
Zakariyya, can you hear the question?
Yes, I hear the question. Yes, I hear the question very well. Yes, I hear the question. I am answering.
Daniel, while we, okay, here we go. Dr. Zakariyya.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Zakariyya, I think Fazlin's network is not so good. We'll just wait a bit and see if it comes right. Fazlin, are you back? Your network was giving you some challenges there.
Yes, I can hear her very well. Loud and clear.
Okay, so I think you can continue answering the question, Dr. Zakariyya.
Okay, Bismillah. Regarding your question of isn't it government policy? Yes, it is government policy to commit genocidal practices and ethnic cleansing. Why do I do that? I am not far away from the event. By the way, I was just right next to Rafah in Egypt. And since 45 days, we were so close. We entered many times to Gaza during the last years, and we are talking about self-experience. Now, the Israelis, what they are doing, they are, first of all, preventing food, preventing health, preventing water. They are not letting the Gazans to have access to income, to education, to all basic things. They are bombarding the hospitals, the schools, the universities, the mosques, the churches. They are destroying the infrastructures. They have done everything possible for the Gazans people to have a very difficult life, which leads to death. For example, when you are destroying the hospitals, the clinics, and you deny them the access for medicine, and you kill the doctors, you are ambushing and destroying the ambulances, and at the same time you don't allow the injured people to be transferred to the already demolished hospitals. What do you call that? This is intentional practice to kill those people even if they are injured. When you don't have them or avail them access to food, to water, to electricity, that means they will be starving. So if you leave them without all basic needs of life, that means you are ethnically cleansing the Gazans people. You tell them to move from the south to from the north to south, then you are attacking them in what they have called the safe corridors, and you kill them and you destroy their houses. You are targeting a whole building where people, civilians who are not participating in any military activities, you are targeting them and you are killing them and demolishing their houses over their heads. Then you request them. It was, it was something which is really weird when, or even disgusting when I hear the legal team of Israel saying that they were warning the civilians to move from their homes and to go to another place, and they give them knowledge that their house will be targeted. What kind of thinking? This is a criminal thinking that you are giving them a notice. We are going to destroy your house. Sorry, you haven't, they haven't listened to you, so you are just telling them I am killing you. What kind of thinking rational you are talking about? So yes, this is a genocidal activities, and the intention is there. It is not individual practices. This is a government strategy and policy to kick out the Palestinian from Gaza and gather them in the south and leave them with no access to life, to anything like water, electricity, food, medicine, hospitals, whatsoever. So you are just killing them in a slow manner, and this is genocide. Regarding the self-defense which they are talking about, you can target the militant groups in Gaza. but you are not targeting the militant groups. According to my communication with the leaders of the resistance movements inside Gaza, a very little number of the Hamas military personnel and Al-Jihad military personnel has been targeted or has been killed. We are talking about mainly 99% civilians, and most of them are children, most of them are women, most of them are elderly. So you are not targeting a military objectives or military targets. When you are claiming that a hospital is being operated as a military base for Hamas, and you cannot prove this, even if in international law, even if you prove that the hospital got military people and you got also civilians in thousands, in terms of thousands, you got no right to kill all the civilians because you want to target one or two military personnel who are inside the hospital, my sister.
Shukran, Dr. Zakariyya. Daniel, to bring it to your side, one of the things I'd like us to perhaps talk about is to look at the merits of this argument, the argument of genocide being perpetrated on the people of Palestine and Gaza specifically, and juxtapose that with a case that was brought before the ICJ, just over a year ago against Russia, where there was a verdict given in favor, specifically the provisional measures. I want us to juxtapose it in terms of is there a substantive case on this side if we compare it to one that has passed just over a year ago?
Well, thank you. If I may just pick up from some of the important points that Dr. Zakariyya raised. I think having not studied the complete submission by Israel and its response today, Israel overall did not respond to the arguments that South Africa has placed before the court. In fact, Israel felt that no one issued the charges were unfair. It felt that it's used to having impunity. It is intolerant. And the reaction of both senior members of the government as well as of the cabinet over the last 24 hours since South Africa submitted its submission to the court has demonstrated that Israel is not used to being held to account. And this was raised by one of the attorneys on the South African team, that Israel feels it can act with impunity and that it must not be questioned. In fact, if I may, and it may be premature, but I feel that Israel has even feels that it has appropriated the word genocide, that the word genocide was conceptualized, and so was the court and the laws around the convention, the Genocide Convention, about Israel, that no one else, it can be about others, but never can it be turned, and that Israel could be accused of practices of genocide, and that all South Africa sought or seeks is to stop the ongoing massacre of women and children in a very constrained space in Gaza. To address your question, there is a feeling in certain circles that South Africa's initiative before the court was motivated by the embarrassment they felt had been inflicted on South Africa when Vladimir Putin could not attend the BRICS summit hosted by South Africa about 6 months ago. That the circumstances of that particular case before the court, South Africa respected the outcomes of the court. That the decision, the court arrived at a decision very quickly, and that restricted the movement of Vladimir Putin into territories that are signatories to the conventions, all all are subscribers to the International
The
Court
Rome
of Justice.
Statute. Yeah.
Yes, and therefore, so no one within Israel's circle, if we saw what the State Department's position on South Africa yesterday was absolutely out of place. But we were not surprised that the United States, Britain, and certain European countries, including Germany, because Germany is carrying this this albatross around its neck about the genocide of Jews. So it will not think objectively about, look objectively at the facts of the South African case. And everybody knows, everybody who is objective. And South Africa is not alone. It has been supported by several countries in its application to the court on the possibilities of genocide in Israel's execution of its defense in the Gaza, where it has been an occupying power for so long. So the comparatives are not easy in law between the case of the Ukraine-Russia compared to the one that South Africa has brought. But I think in a few days we will be able to make a better analysis on Israel's response to the case before the court laid by South Africa, because unlike South Africa submitted its case and Israel had a chance to study its case before it was actually read out before the court. Whereas Israel did not do that. What Israel went back and responded to, it had a preconceived response, which was to reject everything that South Africa said. And as it did in its conclusion, absolutely wanted the court to completely disregard any merits that there may be in South Africa's case before the court.
So thank you for that, Daniel. And I think you raised a very valid point. And one of the last statements that were made, and I want to touch on this because this does speak to a legal aspect of the case, where Israel made the argument that any state or entity that brings a case to the ICJ would actually need or have a conversation with the country that they're actually bringing the ICJ, the case to. So simply put, Israel is stating the case to the ICJ, and they've said that that is one of the jurisdiction matters at play. And they're saying obviously South Africa didn't have a conversation with them. Do you think this will impede our case on a technicality?
Well, no, because it does not mean if there is an exchange of communication that in not responding does not disqualify the argument in law. They padded the amount of communication between themselves and South Africa and expected South Africa in every case to respond immediately. And hence, that does not change the facts of what South Africa had submitted. What they questioned was South Africa had no right to go to the court because in having a conversation with Israel was sufficient to address this issue. But this issue is not about South Africa and Israel. It is not a fight between South Africa and Israel. It is a discussion and an issue of law, of international law. And therefore, South Africa has taken its responsibility to come before the court and to seek redress and to stop the behavior of Israel, which is genocidal in South Africa's argument, and it has provided evidence to that effect. I think we must also put in context that relations between South Africa and Israel as a backstory is that South Africa has cut diplomatic relations with Israel until such time that its intervention and its actions in Gaza are brought to a halt, and that the people of Palestine, and particularly of Gaza, can return to their homes and have a normal life insofar as that is possible, because they have wiped out generations and destroyed the infrastructure. So I don't know how soon that's going to happen. So Israel tried to bring into the public domain its dispute with South Africa. And therefore, it was unsurprising. I don't think the team in South Africa or our Department of Foreign Affairs or Justice expected a different response from Israel.
So in terms of the process, Daniel, last question, in terms of the process going forward, if the court does end up finding that Israel is guilty of genocide, that we've proven that there is intent and practice, what then? What are the steps? What happens? And is there real accountability on the cards, even if we have a positive judgment?
Yeah, I think that's the million-dollar question, Fazlin. I think there are all sorts of permutations and scenarios as to what the outcome could be and what would be the reaction of the parties. What reaction will Israel have if it does not benefit from the indulgence of the court, as it has argued today? Likewise, what is South Africa's plan B? What is the international community's plan B? Is the court going to take its time and be lobbied to take a while to hand down its ruling or judgment that will give Israel and the United States, because Blinken has just been in the US, Secretary of State has just been in the Middle East again, to give them time to sort things out so that by the time the judgment is handed down, the circumstances will be quite different. For example, that Qatar could exert with his party on the Hamas certain pressures that would lead to the release of the prisoners. These are all issues. I think the court, how soon it hands down its ruling would probably determine the reaction of both South Africa and those who supported submission, and of Israel and those who support Israel. I wonder, but on the facts, one which we have seen and witnessed with our own eyes, it's difficult to see the court making a ruling that is totally in favor of Israel's demands. That in fact, Israel struck down all of South Africa's 5 submissions before the court. And it's inconceivable that a neutral court could ignore the seriousness, the gravity of what South Africa has brought to the court.
Thank you, Daniel. So we have a question from a listener, I think via Facebook, which is great. So if you do have any questions, please do comment on our various platforms. So the question from Faisal Daniels is, how will a guilty verdict be enforced? Very good question. And given Israel's propensity for ignoring multilateralism. So Dr. Zakariyya, I'm going to give that question to yourself. How do you anticipate a guilty verdict will be enforced? I do think Daniel covered a little bit of it, but I think it would be good to see what your perspective is on the matter, and yeah, perhaps we can find some sort of accountability within the international court system.
Ruling of the International Justice Court or Court of Justice, they can have the tools to, announce their verdict, and they declare Israel as guilty or not guilty. So they can do their legal part. But the 1 million question, as Daniel put it right, have they got the jurisdiction, got the tools to implement and to bring the leaders of Israel into accountability and to see them behind bars in the jail? This is the question. Unfortunately, and brother Mr. Daniel knows that very well, they don't have the execution tools. That means the International Court of Justice doesn't have the right and the tools to implement their verdicts and their rulings. And this is now goes back to the Security Council. And we know very well that under the 7th section and the 6th section in the Security Council, convention, it says very well that the members of the United Nations will use their military to implement the rulings of the Security Council and the rulings also of the International Court of Justice. Now, that will lead us again to the issue of the veto, the veto which is given to the 5 powerful members of the Security Council, which they can just cancel anything they like. Even one member alone can use the veto power to stop any rulings of the Security Council and to stop also the use of military in case it is needed to implement the verdicts and judgments of the International Court of Justice. Now, this is a very, there is something which is really needs to be, fixed in the international law. We have to fix it. I can now issue, a guilty verdict against Israel, but could I implement what I have ruled in the court? So they can just run away from the international law decisions and whatsoever. Now, from my point of view, this court, and from also the political point of view and international forum, I can say that South Africa has won already the battle. For me, the Palestinians, they have won already the legal battle, because the Palestinians are fighting on many fronts. The first front is the military front with Hamas and the resistance groups, and they managed, after years of silence, the issue of Palestine became a forgotten issue. People, they don't just look at Palestine as an occupied territory, and unfortunately, the Arab countries started to normalize the relation with Israel, and especially now the Gulf region is rushing to normalize the relation with Israel. Now, when we started on the 7th of October, the military and the resistance movement started their activities that stopped all the normalization with Israel from the Arab part, especially the Gulf countries. They are being embarrassed now. They cannot continue their plans to normalize. Now, as we know very well, it is not really a legal battle what we are fighting here. It is a battle of minds and hearts to get attention to the whole world. Look what is happening over there. The international apparatus for justice are lacking the tools for implementation, the tools of bringing people into justice, and that should be, discussed. I attended many seminars with United Nations regarding the changing of the convention of the Security Council to stop that, issue of giving one country the right to just, be used to not stop the crimes going on all over the world. The Security Council has to be changed, and the mechanism of taking decision in the Security Council has to be changed, and the veto power given to the superpower has to be changed. We understand fully that Israel, when they started to respond to the 7th of October, they don't want only to get Hamas into accountability. In fact, it is a wider plan. If we remember the century deal, or the deal of the century, which was during the time of Trump, Netanyahu, and Kushner, when they have decided that they have to create Israel as an absolute Jewish state. They don't want Muslims, they don't want Christians, they don't want Arabs. So in that plan, which we call it Safqat al-Qarn, or the century deal, the plan was to expel all Palestinians from Gaza to Sinai, and to expel all the West Bank Palestinians to Jordan, and to expel all the Arab Israelis who are in the land of 1948 outside of Palestine. So the historical Palestine, which is from the Mediterranean until to Jordan River, it will be absolute Jewish state. Then they will have annexation to parts of Jordan, parts of Saudi Arabia, parts of Iraq, going down to Egypt, the whole Sinai also. So they create what they call the Great Israeli Kingdom in the area. So they have actually, in this, response to the 7th of October, actually they have started the actual implementation of the deal of the century, or the Safqat al-Qarn, which was started with Kushner, Trump, and Netanyahu. I have seen by myself, while I am in Arish and Rafah, I have seen infrastructure after the Rafah border of Egypt, 52 kilometers from there, passing Sheikh Zuwayd area. I have seen in Al Arish, new towns are being built, like the infrastructures, the road, the water, boreholes, the hospitals. Everything is ready to receive the Gazans people and to expel them from Gaza to Sinai. But they want to make a buffer zone between Rafah border and the new area where the Palestinians refugees will be settled, which is almost 50 kilometers, and they will give them a land of 710 square kilometers. I am talking that because I have seen that by my eyes. So that land, it will be surrounded from all borders with Egyptian land. So if the Palestinians decide in the future to launch rockets to Israel, it will bypass the Egyptian territories. So it will be the duty of Egypt to stop the resistance movement of continuing their activities. What I am trying to say, that what Israel is doing now is not only responding to the 7th of October. They are doing now the forced expulsion of all Palestinians, whether Muslims or Christians. They want to remove them totally outside of Palestine, so it will be a pure Jewish state. And you have seen Netanyahu at the United Nations when he showed the map, and he showed that the land of Israel is all Palestine, and including parts of Jordan. Jordan, they have decided it into divided it into two parts. One part will be with Iraq, the other part will be with Israel, and it annexed parts of Saudi Arabia, like Al Madinah Al Munawwara and different parts. So they are doing a strategic plan. This is not only a war, and they have started to implement this. Now they are offering Egypt 4 issues, and they are offering them to waive all of their loans, which is 220 billion US dollars loans. They are offering them just to waive those loans. They are offering them to stop and cancel the Ben Gurion, tunnel between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, which is going beside the Suez Canal. So Egypt will not be affected. They promised them to cancel that project. Also, they have promised them to bring back the 2 islands, Tiran and Souvenir, to the Egyptian jurisdiction under Egypt, which was given to Saudi Arabia, and to cancel also the railway project from India going down to Emirates, to Saudi Arabia, to Jordan, to Haifa, Israel, and that also another threat to the economy of Egypt. That only for one thing, for Egypt to accept the 2.3 million Gazans people to be transferred from Gaza to Sinai, and to give them what is called the Palestinian state, which is living beside the Israeli state, but with a buffer zone. Now, this is also another issue for Israel regarding the gas, the gas wells which were found on the seashores of Gaza, which are the biggest gas, well in the whole world. And if the Gazan people got access to that gas, that means they will be a very powerful state and very powerful country. So Israel will not at all accept for Gazans and the Palestinian state to take that gas, because that gas wells are described to be one of the largest gas wells in the whole world. So they have to also take it, because Israel is not going to empower the Palestinian state, which they are talking about. They want to deprive them the right to take their natural resources. A lot of issues which we can talk about that. Now, the international tribunal in the international court, now they brought Israel for the first time. And Mr. Daniel put it very right that Israel was always feeling that they have immunity. They are immune from accountability, from being asked what you are doing. Now, South Africa came and put into that Israel could be accountable for their practices, for their genocidal, activities. This court issue is a very important issue because it covers the legal part. The military part is being handled by the resistance movement. The political part is handled by the Palestinian authorities, which is a very, very weak authority, which is not participating at all. But the political part with Hamas political wing also is doing something else also very important, which is ongoing. The Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and what is happening now in Iraq, and all of that with my sadness that they didn't really were according to our expectation. But look, for the Houthis, now they have put the whole economy of the sailing activities and marine activities, they are putting it on hold. And that affected the international community. That means the Arab world got a lot of tools to use in our struggle with the Zionist entity. The Houthis alone, they made the life of the Israelis very difficult, because economically now the whole world is being affected by the military activities of the Houthis. Hezbollah also, if he will start to activate the southern front from Lebanon, from Syria, and from Iraq, that will also influence Israel, that Hamas is not being left alone. Now comes the legal front, which is handled by South Africa. It completed the circle. We really were in need to convince the Western nation, and especially the people, look at Israel. Israel is not that, angel part who are oppressed. Israelis are the criminals, and the Palestinians are the victims in the eyes of the Western people, that Israel is defending itself, but actually Israel is an occupying force, and that occupying force has to stop. It is not a victim. Israel is the criminal. Israel is the source of all troubles there. Now South Africa brought that for the first time in history to tell the whole Western people, nations who are not aware of what is happening there, they will tell them Israel is an occupying power. Israel is not defending itself. Israel is doing 76 years of atrocities and 76 years of massacres and killing the people, confiscating the lands, destroying the churches and the hospitals and the mosques. This is the actual face of Israel. It is a terrorist face. It is a face which is killing the children, and the blood of the children are filling the land and the sand of Gaza. So this is the first time we were able to address the West and to market ourselves. We, the indigenous owners of Palestine, we are the victims, and the Israelis are the aggressors and the criminals, my sister.
Shukran so much, Dr. Zakariyya. I think you've given us quite a comprehensive input. And I think one of the things that you touched on, which is so, so important, I think, for our audience, both in South Africa and internationally, is to look at the role of the UN and its structure and whether or not it serves the modern world in the way that the world is structured. Because I think the valid point that you make is that at the end of the day, if this case gets brought before the United Nations Security Council, we have 5 member countries that can literally veto it. Specifically, if we look at it within the context of Israel's biggest ally, the United States, and
Yes.
Many could argue that they are party to the Genocide Convention and what is happening in Gaza specifically. And so based on that, it's very likely that this case, could see that being the unfortunate result. And I think this is when we have to start the calling much louder for a reform within the United Nations specifically, because otherwise, from a pure legal standpoint, the accountability of states becomes very, very difficult. Daniel, I'm going to come to you for one final input before we close. And I want to ask just very briefly if we could touch on what are the possible ramifications for South Africa. South Africa has a lot of trade agreements with countries that actually completely disagree with South Africa's case at the ICJ. We're talking about, the AGOA agreements within the context of the USA. We're looking at, the UK, France, Germany, all of these countries that have come out in support of Israel. What are the political ramifications for us within that context?
Yeah, I think since November the 21st, when the South African Parliament voted, I think it was 248 to 91, in favor of a resolution to suspend diplomatic relations with Israel and to close its embassy in South Africa until there is a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, South Africa has been under assault. And this comes a few months prior to BRICS, when South Africa was accused by the United States ambassador in South Africa of exporting arms to Russia. And this was around the whole issue of whether or not, if you recall, whether President Putin would be allowed to attend the very important BRICS summit, which led to the enlargement of the BRICS bloc. But going forward, it is clear that irrespective of the outcome of the court's ruling, South Africa has been bold enough to take on Israel, which we know, everyone knows, will recognize or disregard resolutions of the United Nations, and there are so many, that when it needed protection, irrespective of whether it was a Democrat or a Republican in the White House, it will always have its back covered in the Security Council. When it went over 40 years ago before the International Committee of the Red Cross and was expelled, it was exactly the same thing about the international humanitarian law. So the issues of breaches of international law or international humanitarian law or the Genocide Convention will make no difference. We do not expect Israel to take a different position. But the fact that South Africa has taken this case on behalf of many like-minded states to the court has insulted Israel, has taken Israel on, as Dr. Zakariyya said, has brought this issue to the fore. We all know it is there in the fore, but never has it been this level of exposure on the role and the behavior of Israel in the occupied territories of Palestine and Gaza. So for South Africa, I think the next 18 months will be a difficult time. I think we are going into an election year. It makes it even more difficult. There will be a lot of pressure, direct and indirect, through various channels on South Africa. We have to expect it. We know that there's the elections in the United States, and so is there in the European Union. So this flux, geopolitical, global, makes it a very dangerous time we go into as a world, as an international community. But also, South Africa is going into this period of uncertainty, both domestically and in the elections, and we know the situation domestically, but it is taking that domestic environment and superimposing this with the geopolitical uncertainties globally. I think we hope that the South African government is aware of the road ahead and will take the necessary steps to secure not only its frontiers, but to secure its institutions. As the Institute of Security Studies published a report about 4 or 5 months ago, warning South Africa that of the possible intervention using the issue on the credibility of South African upcoming elections. So there are many issues playing out for South Africa, and it is clear that the behavior of the United States and Britain, and as we saw, Sky Television did not run South Africa's deposition before the court, but it ran Israel's response today live. So there are signals that we have a tough road ahead for South Africa, and there's a lot.
I think we have lost Daniel, unfortunately, but his input was very, very valid. Just to summarize a lot of the key points I think that he said, which is obviously South Africa's entering an election year next year, which I think is a very, very important and critical time. And there's a reality that we need to expect some sort of backlash. So what I want to do is thank Dr. Zakariyya Al-Sheikh, who is former member of parliament in Jordan and obviously a political analyst, for his expert insights on the court proceedings over the last 2 days, as well as to thank Daniel Kinnear, who is the director of the Africa Insights think tank, for his input as well. We obviously, await the outcome of the court judgment, which should happen within the next few weeks. And we will look critically, obviously, to analyze whether or not firstly, there will be a positive result in terms of, this being constituted as a genocide. And then secondly, whether or not Israel will be legally held accountable. But I think to highlight a very important point from a moral standpoint that Dr. Zakariyya made, which is that the moral fight has been won in terms of raising the awareness in the minds and in the hearts of people all over the world. And this is, I think, an important journey that we all have to engage in, is to ensure that we continue to raise that awareness, to have the conversation, to not be numbed by, the fact that this has been going on now, yes, for 75 years, but specifically over the last few months, that we keep that voice aloud. And I think this case specifically has reignited for a lot of people the importance of talking about what is happening in Gaza. So I once again want to thank our special guests, and then also thank our audience for joining and for their questions.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.